Hello everyone, and welcome back. Today we're going to talk about the macro game of a mission. Now this is an extremely nebulous concept that we basically made up, so allow me to explain. When we talk about how someone is playing the macro game, what we're referring to is how well or poorly they're interacting with the objectives that are required to get them through a mission. This is, by definition, a one-to-one comparison of speed play. The faster you're playing, the better you are playing the macro game. And because there's such a direct correlation between the macro game objectives and how you play it, and time, we're going to be using a timeline to represent this. Every mission that you play will have a different theoretical timeline based upon everything from the mission type being played all the way down to the builds and classes that your team is playing. The timeline I'm going to be constructing here is going to be roughly framed around playing solo. You can essentially imagine 3 more additional timelines below the one that we're looking at right now that have additional unique blocks of time. This will make more sense in a moment. But for the sake of this example, just understand that this is being thought of as a solo experiment. So looking at our timeline, we're going to use Refinery as an example because I find that it's one of the most adept examples of having engagement with the macro game and going back to being able to do nothing to progress the macro game the most amount of times of any mission type. If that didn't make sense, just stick with me. What is the goal of a refinery mission? It is to extract liquid morkite. How do we do this? We run pipelines from the central refinery out to 3 separate pump jacks and start refining. Once we're done refining, we press a button and the mission ends by us getting into the drop pod. There are elements of this mission type that we can accelerate with good play, but there are also parts of this mission type that we cannot affect no matter what we do. So let's look at that timeline for a refinery mission. Whenever the refinery mission starts, the refinery is not in the cave. It has to fall down and unpack itself before you can grab pipelines off of it. This is a hard limitation. We cannot do anything to progress the primary objective until the refinery hits the ground and unpacks itself. Once it is unpacked, though, we have a lot to do. We have 3 separate pipelines to run and to build once they are run out. This means that if we create 3 different pipelines that are 3 linkages long, we have to go back along every pipeline and hold the interact button on each of those linkages. This is where a lot of that macro game play comes into play. Having Bosco consistently building pipes while you're running another one is excellent macro game play. Once all the pipelines are connected, you'll press a button on the refinery and this starts the pumping sequence. Now, once again, we are unable to do anything but wait to progress the primary objective. At a certain point, the pipes will break. At this point, we'll have to go along, find all of the broken points on the pipes, repair them in order to start the refining going again. Thankfully, we do not have to go back and press the button, so as soon as our repairs are done, we will be making progress again. This sequence repeats itself a couple of times. For simplicity in this example, we're just going to represent it as one block of time. You understand that it happens multiple times, though. After a couple cycles of breaking pipes, the refinery will be 100% full. You'll be able to press the button, launch the rocket, and now you'll be left waiting for the drop pod to arrive. Once again, we're back to a point where we can do nothing to progress the mission aside from wait. Once the pod lands, in a perfect world, everyone is standing right outside of it, ready to get in as soon as the doors open, as to not lose any time waiting for people. As you can see, the green areas on this timeline are where we are able to variably affect the amount of time the mission takes. If we take a very long time building pipelines, that pushes everything else to the right. But if you've ever played Deep Rock Galactic before, you probably are throwing up your hands right now and saying that the game is not only primary objectives. And you would be absolutely correct in saying that. Gold star. We have some other things to worry about on this timeline. Namely, in this example, a secondary objective, Nitra to continue to have ammo to defend yourself, and any events that you might have found. Now this is where game knowledge and that good macro gameplay comes into the equation. You'll notice that we have great blocks of time on this timeline where we are not able to progress the primary objective. A perfect place for us to slot in that secondary objective, gathering Nitra, and completing events. This is what the macro game of DRG is all about. It's about having the awareness to not be mining nitra while there's pipelines to be building. It's to not be running around picking flowers while there's pipes to be repairing. There are literally millions of different examples that I could go into of the good and bad choices that you can make and how you're spending your time in order to remain efficient, but obviously I can't explain every one of those million scenarios to you, and even if I could, you wouldn't be able to draw upon that database of information while you're playing a mission. That's just not realistic. So what we're talking about is how to make these better decisions and stay cognizant of your progression through the mission and the role that you need to be playing in that environment. This is the core of speed play. It's being aware and making good decisions, time management, and this imaginary timeline. It's about sneaking in productive action in between moments where the game demands you pay attention to the primary. We could not be building pipelines in order to get that 80 nitra for our first resupply. Or we could already have 80 nitra in the team's pockets before the refinery even hits the ground and becomes available for progression. Is that always going to happen? No. But it's something that you should always have in your mind as a potential for improvement. While that JDIS that you see when you get right out of the pod in a refinery mission will look very enticing, just understand what your priorities are. Is getting that JDIS right now going to force you to skip out on laying a pipeline in order to get nitra? You won't know until you get there. So having hundreds of missions worth of experience on different classes and acquaintance with the tools that you're bringing into the environment will allow you to make much more informed decisions and understand the second and third order effects that your actions or your negligence towards a certain element of the game may have the longer the mission goes on. The gameplay that you're watching in the background while I'm talking about all of this is not perfect, and I think it's very important to show you that. It's very, very difficult to have absolutely no downtime or no miss or no time loss on primary objectives whenever you're juggling combat in the higher difficulties as well. Even on Hazard 3, you can easily get pushed off of objectives by pester bugs like stingtails or menaces or acid spitters. So it's not like this thought process only applies to Haz 5. Just understand that the higher the difficulty goes, the more time you're going to have to dedicate to coping with the bugs that are in the mission as well. It's not always going to be feasible to be on the primary and dedicating 100% of your attention to it as soon as it becomes available. To the grave dismay of many 6x2 40 nitra resupply 24/7 all achievement unlock server enjoyers, Hazard 5 can produce some pretty heinous swarms whenever you're trying to focus on an objective. So knowing how to kite and manipulate bug AI is another huge element that should go on this timeline. This is just one of those topics, though, that it's never going to be possible for me to explain every possible scenario of this to you. I can show you what a solo refinery roughly looks like on a timeline and what optimal choices you could make in a theoretical situation. But this doesn't consider the potential team comps you're going to have of up to 1, 2, 3, or 4 players, potentially with class duplicates, and the wild variance that can come from the builds that those players are bringing, their skill level, technical knowledge, their awareness of this playstyle. It's a near infinite amount of possibilities and situations that you can get yourself into, so I'm not here to explain to you the decisions you should be making on a refinery mission. I don't want that to be anyone's takeaway from this video. I'm simply using refinery as a vessel to visualize what I'm trying to pass along to you. The takeaway from this video is paying attention to the progression of the mission and knowing what your limiting factors are. Sure, the only hard and fast slowdown of a point extraction is waiting for the pod after you press the button. Everything up to that point, if there were 7 of quarks sitting on the ground next to the minehead, you could be done and press the button in 15 seconds. Completely possible. But that's not how the game plays. I can't explain to you every situation and every different angle that you could be throwing a quarks at that minehead from. Especially considering that I don't know what your build is, I don't know what your team comp is, I don't know what overclocks that you have unlocked, I don't know your skill level or the hazard that you're playing on. So if I tell you to just avoid bugs as scout, that may not hold true whenever there's a nemesis spawn camping the minehead just trying to grab you. I'm not trying to ruin the way that you like to play the game, and I hope that this video doesn't do that. But the next time that you get on DRG, try to look at the game through a lens of what is available for me to do right now. Am I able to progress the mission with direct actions that I could be taking right now? And are the actions that I'm taking, whenever progression is available, the optimal ones? Even if you don't want to play optimally, just try to at least put yourself through the thought experiment of understanding what the best thing you could be doing is. Because at the end of the day, you just might like playing a little bit more optimally. But that's about all I have for you today. As always, thank you for watching, and have a nice day.